go ahead and get started, and then people can continue to trickle in. But to begin, good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this virtual webinar, which is about AMPS, for AMPS EV customers. And my name is Steve Mariani, and I'm an Energy Resource Analyst here at AMP. This may be your 100th Zoom webinar, or it might be your first, so we just want to cover a couple basics on the technical aspects this evening. Your mics and your cameras are not on during the presentation by default, and then the chat function will allow you to chat to the host as well as the panelists, who are all AMP staff members. These measures were all taken to reduce the chances of getting Zoom bombed this evening. And in the interest of your time, we will be using the Q&A feature in order to address your questions, and we hope to do this in a more streamlined fashion. So please feel free to write in your questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation, and that will be answered either with a written response, which will get posted back into the Q&A box, or we will be also reserving some time at the end for a Q&A portion, so they may be addressed also verbally at that point. But we are going to try and limit it to an hour of your time this evening. So without further ado, let's begin with tonight's agenda. So tonight, we're going to take a deeper look at AMP's proposed time of use rate for customers with EVs. You may recall earlier this year, AMP sought approval for a time of use rate plan. The city's Public Utilities Board directed AMP to do more customer education before they would approve the implementation of the new rate plan. So that's why we are here tonight. On tonight's agenda, we'll start with a quick overview of our current rate offerings for EV customers. Then we'll provide a detailed look at the proposed time of use rate. Then that will be optional for all of you. Then we will review the ways that you can boost your potential for savings under a time of use rate and who are the best candidates for the new rate option. Then we will cover the tools that are available for you to analyze your own usage and determine whether time of use will be a good fit for you. And finally, we'll wrap things up with a quick reminder about the current incentives and resources that are available to all of AMP's customers. So we'll get started tonight with AMP's current residential rates. AMP uses the tiered rate plan to bill your monthly electricity use. The tiered rate plans follow a structure in which the more electricity you use, the higher the rate gets. You've likely noticed these tiers on your electricity bill. So here's how it works. For the majority of our customers who have gas heating in their home and they live in single-family dwellings, in the summer months, the first 259 kilowatt hours you use will be charged at the Tier 1 rate of 11 cents per kilowatt hour. And in the winter time, this is the rate you pay for your first 310 kilowatt hours. Next, the next 76 kilowatt hours you use is charged at the Tier 2 rate of 18 cents per kilowatt hour in the summertime. And that is, in the wintertime, that's the rate you're charged for your next 94 kilowatt hours. And then the remaining energy you use above that level is charged at the Tier 3 rate of 27 cents per kilowatt hour. Keep in mind, this is just the energy charge portion of your bill. Your total electric bill also includes your flat monthly customer charge of $17.30, as well as other taxes and fees. Until recently, tiered rates have been the norm in California as they encourage conservation of electricity, and they've been in place in Alameda for over 40 years. And that third tiered level was introduced in 2006. So all of you are currently on this tiered rate plan, and when you brought home your EV and started charging it, you probably discovered that your electric usage moved up to Tier 2 and Tier 3 rates each month. So you signed up for AMP's EV discount to take some of the sting out of that. Now, let's take a minute to talk about the origin of the EV discount. AMP introduced this discount in 1997, and back then, there were relatively few EVs coming onto the market. We understood that customers charging at home would bear the burden of higher electric bills while they were trying to do something good for the planet. The discount, which ranges from $9 to $21, was established based on the weight of your vehicle, with most of you receiving $15 in a discount. Now, when you sign up for the discount, you're also agreeing to charge your EV at home during a span of off-peak hours between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., among other requirements. Now, if we look at how your electricity compares with the average Alamedan without an EV, we see that your usage is greater for all hours, and AMP lacks the technology to track when you're charging your EV, or if you're charging at home at all, which is another condition for receiving the discount. We want you to charge during off-peak hours because electricity is significantly more expensive during times of high or peak demand. So AMP would like to avoid buying this expensive energy and be able to pass those savings along to those of you who are actually charging in the off-peak hours. So to achieve this, we will need a dynamic rate that incentivizes charging in the off-peak hours. And this is why many utilities have already turned to a time of use rate for their customers. Last December, the Public Utilities Board approved a plan that would phase out the EV discount when the time of use rate went into effect. So we want to talk a bit briefly on why that discount is going away. With all of our incentive programs, we wish to inspire adoption of a technology, such as EVs, or a habit like energy conservation. As technologies rise in popularity, incentives get phased out. For instance, the rebates under California's solar initiative were phased out at the end of 2017. For the first 10 years or so, there were relatively few early adopters that received the discount, but adoption rates have taken off since then. In this graph below, which shows DMV registrations, your adoption of EVs here in Alameda has soared above the state average. In Alameda, we currently sit about double the state average for EV adoption. Where we are today, AMP wants to continue to provide incentives, but we want to incentivize those of you who are charging your vehicles in ways that also help our grid, and the best way to provide those savings is through a time of use rate. So let's discuss the time of use plan that AMP has proposed. There are two periods of the day to familiarize yourself with for the time of use rate. The on-peak period lasts from 5 to 9 p.m. on the weekdays, and the off-peak period is all other hours of the day on weekdays and all hours of the day on weekends and holidays. Your on-peak usage is the amount of electricity you consume between 5 and 9 p.m. on weekdays, and your off-peak usage is the electricity you use at all the other times. So when we say something like shifting your usage out of the on-peak period, we simply mean choosing to use an appliance a few hours earlier or later, or plugging in your EV at 9 p.m. rather than 8 p.m. Rather than having 3 tiered rates and easily not knowing when you've moved into a higher tier, the proposed time of use rate consists of just 2 flat rates, one for each period. From 5 to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday, you would pay an on-peak price of 50 cents per kilowatt hour, and if it's outside of these hours, or a weekend, or a holiday, you will be paying the off-peak rate of 13.2 cents. The on-peak period was determined by the hours when electricity use is highest and consequently most expensive. As some of you may notice, these hours are in a similar period to when California was recently calling its flex alert period. Some other examples of time of use pricing include happy hours at restaurants when they're open, a twilight rate at a golf course, or a higher price on a ride-sharing app, sometimes called a surge price, or an airline ticket that is more expensive at a popular time to travel. So how could time of use rates benefit you? Well, first off, tiered rates offer you less control over your bill, particularly if you have energy use that can't be reduced. By comparison, time of use rates enable you to control how much you are charged for your electricity because you can control when you use energy on a given day instead of over the span of a month. Secondly, time of use rates create great value when they're paired with smart devices. Today, there are hundreds of smart home and connected devices that make it easier to program and plan when you use your electricity. Smart plugs, thermostats, Advanced EV chargers and even some of the cars themselves allow for usage to be controlled and set around time of use rates. This can help take some of the anxiety out of timing your electricity use. And finally, I want to emphasize that AMP's proposed time of use rate is optional. You can decide if this rate option is right for you. So let's look at how to determine if you're a good candidate for our proposed time of use rate. By shifting some of your usage, such as charging your EV during off-peak hours, you may benefit from lower pricing and have more control over your bill. With time of use rates, when you use electricity is as important as how much you're using. So to get into this mindset, you should take inventory of your appliances that use electricity and when you typically use these during the day, as well as throughout the week. A good way to think about your use is dividing things into your shiftable uses and your non-shiftable uses. So for all of you, your fridge is likely running all day, every day. You might have some lights on when you're at home, as well as maybe your computer. And if you're a TV watcher, you probably have some specific hours in the evening that you watch. For your big end uses, we've identified a few that are more likely to be shiftable. These include your dishwasher, your laundry appliances, and most importantly, when you charge your EV. Programming these shiftable end uses, whether that's automatic or manually, can help you shift all of this electricity out of the on-peak hours. So now that you've identified what you can shift, you should also keep in mind that not all appliances are created equal with regards to how much electricity they use. For many of you, your EV charging makes up the greatest portion of your electricity use. And as we mentioned, this is the key factor in offering you as a customer group the time of use rate. After that, your dryer and your dishwasher present a smaller share of shiftable load. And overall, your typical shiftable loads make up a majority of your electricity consumption, which is a good thing for time of use rates. We'll go into further details on the range that we've provided for EV charging in the next slide. For your non-shiftable end uses, your high-end uses depend greatly on your technology as well as your habits. So in these figures, your lighting and your fridge usage are shown in ranges because they depend on how efficient your technology is and if you typically conserve energy by flipping off your lights when you don't need them on. Nearly all of your appliances nowadays come with an energy rating that will provide you more details on how many kilowatts they use per hour. For appliances like a desktop computer and your TV, you can assure yourself that even if you're using these appliances fairly often, they don't actually require a lot of electricity to run. So in the last slide, we provided a range of electricity use for your EV charging. This is because, again, your electricity use is largely based on your habits, and it's also based on the efficiency of your vehicle. So let's start by showing for all electric EVs. And I'll use this laser pointer here to kind of walk us through the table. What you can find on the top row is your average mileage that you drive per year. And then coming down in this second column, you'll find the fuel efficiency of your vehicle, which is typically measured in kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So starting with the most efficient model out there currently, the Tesla Model 3 takes about 25 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So as you can follow from the table, this is approximately your monthly kilowatt hour usage if you're doing all your charging at home. You can see these numbers get bigger the more you typically drive. And then by comparison, you kind of come down the list here and you can see the other models of EVs out there. As they get less efficient, that means that they're typically going to consume more kilowatt hours per month for the same amount of driving. Now there's other factors that'll weigh into how much you typically use in a month. And so it's important for you to look up specifically which model you have and which year, because these can cause differences in the overall fuel efficiency. So in the next For those of you with plug-in hybrids, these calculations get a little bit more complicated because there's more diversity in your charging habits. So starting from the top row here, we have it listed here as the number of days per month that you fully recharge your battery. So you can come over to the right side. This is a daily charging habit. And over here, this is more of a weekly charging habit. So the same rules apply for fuel efficiency. It's typically measured in kilowatt hours per 100 miles. And then typically there's also a range put on the battery size, and that range is measured in number of miles. So if you drive a Prius Prime, which is fairly efficient, but has a battery size on the smaller end, these are your typical monthly kilowatt hour usages. And these will differ if you have a larger vehicle, which is a little bit less efficient, such as the Chrysler Pacifica. And if you have a plug-in hybrid that has a larger battery, such as a Honda Clarity or a Chevy Volt, this is also going to lead to higher monthly kilowatt hour usages. And that's just because your car can drive for longer using electricity, so it's going to take more electricity to charge the battery. The last point we want to note for this is that the amount of electricity that you use per hour is going to be higher if you're charging with a level 2 charger versus a level 1 charger, since overall it takes less time to charge, but you're going to be charging at a higher rate. You should keep these things in mind when you're planning when you're going to charge your EV so that you can avoid the on-peak period for charging. I'll pause here, remind you, because there's a lot of information, that if you have questions, you can submit them at any time into the Q&A box. All right. So now let's break down some example bills under time of use rates, as well as tiered rates. We'll be showing you 3 customer examples using the following metrics. So I'll walk you through this table. We'll give you the average monthly consumption in the summer months, followed by your energy charge at this usage level on your current tiered rates. The third row is the energy charge under the proposed time of use rate before any behavior change. And so when I say before behavior change, we typically know that for customers across all consumption habits, you typically use a little less than 20% of your electricity in the on-peak period. The fourth row is your energy charge under time of use with a behavior change, which assumes that you'll shift about 1/3 of what you currently use in the on-peak hours into the off-peak hours. Below that, we've calculated the average savings per month in the summer and the winter months. Now, when I show the numbers next, you're going to see that the winter usage is typically different than the summer, and that's to reflect that average usage is usually higher in the winter time than in the summertime. So here's an average AMP user with an electric vehicle. They have gas heating, and they're in a single-family home. They typically use 550 kilowatt hours per month. At this level, their tiered energy charge is typically $101 without the EV discount. Now, under their current usage habits, which again is just under 20% of their total usage in the on-peak hours, their charge for energy under the time of use would be $109. Now, if they exercise some of the behavior changes and they're able to move 1/3 of the energy from the on-peak hours into the off-peak hours, they can be saving a couple dollars per month at the summertime, and in the wintertime, they're going to be just about breaking even with what they were paying under the tiered rate. So to help you conceptualize this, here's what you might see if you match with this average EV's customer profile. You typically will have 4 to 5 people in your home. Your largest electricity uses that may be shifted will include your EV charging, your dishwasher, and your dryer. And you're somewhat likely to save by switching to the time of use rates if you're able to shift your end uses into the off-peak hours. So if you use more than the average EV owner in Alameda, you can expect the following bill impacts. Under the current rate, you pay around $142 in your monthly energy charges, and under a time of use rate, you would pay $139. Now, if you're able to exercise the behavior changes, shift this third of your energy into the off-peak hours, you'd be saving roughly $19 a month in the summertime and $18 in the wintertime. If you're a high user, you might have a similar household size to that of an average user, but you also might likely have multiple electric vehicles, or you have more electric appliances like water or space heating. If you own multiple electric vehicles and you charge both of them at home, you have a higher share of controllable or shiftable loads, and therefore you are more likely to save under a time of use rate. If you have electric space heating, this might be harder to shift, but by preheating your home in the cooler months, this can help you save money. And if you have electric water heating, reducing your hot water usage from showering, doing laundry, and dishwashing in the on-peak hours can also help you save money. In general, the higher your energy use is, the higher your likelihood is to save money on a time of use rate. You're even more likely to save under the time of use rate if your higher end uses tend to be shiftable. For those of you with only one electric vehicle currently, this is also a good comparison if you're considering an additional electric vehicle. With multiple EVs, the savings potential from a time of use rate will increase with the reduced costs of the off-peak hours. Lastly, we'll take a look at a low usage example. So at 400 kilowatt hours per month in the summer and 450 in the winter time, you can expect to pay $10 to $15 more a month in your energy charges. If you use less electricity than average, you might have a smaller footprint due to fewer people living in your home, or you could be a solar customer. Typically, your highest shiftable end uses are your EV, if you're charging it at home, your dishwasher, and your dryer. If you're a low user, you're already benefiting from the tiered rate since, as I mentioned earlier, it incentivizes energy conservation. So we recommend that you stay on this rate since you're unlikely to save by switching to the time of use rate. A couple notes for solar customers. If you're on the ERG rate currently, you can switch on to time of use without impacting your compensation rate for surplus energy. If you're a NEM customer, you can join time of use rate if you switch over to the ERG rate for your solar. One last thing to keep in mind is if you are on the ERG rate, you net out your self-consumption during the hours that your solar system is producing. So you should consider that your solar system generates for more hours of the on-peak period during the summertime than in the wintertime. This means that the share of your usage during the on-peak hours might be lower in the summer than it is in the wintertime. So we've covered some of the generalities of the time of use rate, and we've offered some specific examples, but many of you out there may still be wondering how you can determine your own household usage and which example you best match with. So let's take a look at the tools available for you to examine your own usage patterns and help to simulate a time of use bill. You can find your detailed energy use by logging onto your account on the AMP website at the link provided here. Your login page will look like this. Once you're logged in, you can select the Usage tab from the top, and if it's not already displayed, you can click on the Monthly View to see your total energy use by month. Your monthly usage is displayed above the bars for the last 12 months. Above the graph, you can see the average usage, which is displayed here in orange. Since this example customer has a monthly average of 855 kilowatt hours, we believe that this customer could be a likely candidate for saving money on time of use. So let's choose a summer month to analyze first. By double-clicking the bar above the month July 2020, it will direct you to the daily breakdown. Now you can see the daily usage for the month you selected, and we can drill down further from here. Depending on what you know about your usage habits, you might be able to pick out the days that you charge your electric vehicle. From this example, it seems that EV charging might occur every few days, and it might be spread over 2 days like this if it's charging overnight. So let's select what might be an EV charging day to see the usage throughout the day. You can do this again by double-clicking on the bar above the day that you want to see. So here we have the hourly usage for July 8th. You can scroll left and right to see the hourly usage throughout the day. And as suspected, the high usage comes at the very end of the day, which is likely when a programmed EV charger or an EV is plugged in for overnight charging. From this view, you can analyze when and how much electricity you use throughout your day. Since the peak period occurs between 5 and 9 p.m., you can sum up the 4 hours of usage, and here it equals 4.33 kilowatt hours. From the previous slide, we saw that this customer's daily usage was 35.28 kilowatt hours. So if we do a little bit of math here, we divide 4.33 by 35.28, we're going to get the breakdown, and in this case, this customer used 12% of their electricity during the on-peak period. Now, this isn't enough to make the conclusion that they're going to save money, since we only looked at one day, but we do recommend that you get a sense of your energy consumption by exploring different days over different seasons, as well as seeing how your usage will vary on weekdays when you're charging your EV versus on days when you don't. To reiterate the takeaways that you should be thinking about when you analyze your own usage, if you're using below 15% of your energy during the on-peak period, and you are at or above the average usage, which is about 550 kilowatt hours per month in the summer and 600 in the winter time, you have an increased likelihood for saving money under the time of use rate. Now, the higher your usage is above the averages that we've showed for monthly consumption, the higher your on-peak percentage can be while still having an opportunity to save money on the rate. So in addition to viewing your usage, AMP has created a time of use calculator to help you make the cost comparison between charging your EV on the proposed time of use rate versus your current tiered rate plan. Here you can find this on the AMP website when you first log on, not logging on, but just going to the AMP website and clicking the Electric Vehicles tab on the home page here. Then you can click on the rate comparison to find the calculator. So when you scroll down from there, what you'll find is that the calculator will allow you to compare the cost of charging your electric vehicle on the proposed time of use rate to the cost at the current Tiered 3 rates. These are the monthly costs associated with an average EV's charging load. If you click on the Adjust Usage button here, it will make this slider appear. And by moving the slider, you can see the cost will change for charging your electric vehicle as you move in and out of the on-peak period. You can see you have halved your electric vehicle charging cost just by moving out into the off-peak period. On the same page, you can see the comparison to how much you would pay for the same amount of EV charging on the current Tier 3 plan, or Tier 3 rate, excuse me. Soon, this calculator will be more customizable, and it will allow you to enter some more information about which EV you drive and how much you drive it. And this is going to change the monthly costs under both the proposed time of use rate as well as the tiered rate. So finally, let's take a minute to review what AMP and other organizations currently have to offer you as an EV owner. For new EV purchases, there are the federal and state programs available for rebates and tax credits. AMP offers rebates for level 2 chargers, and we recently introduced a rebate for purchasing used electric vehicles. If you still have concerns about how your charging will affect your bill after the discount goes away, we also encourage you to take advantage of the free DC fast chargers that are available out front of our service station at 2000 Grand Street here in Alameda. And lastly, AMP is committed to educating you and all of our customers on the benefits of driving electric. AMP publishes many educational resources on its website about EV benefits. And later this month, AMP will be hosting a webinar for prospective EV owners instead of the in-person EV event that AMP held last year at the Alameda Car Show. And finally, AMP manages an EV listserv where you can receive EV updates and information in a periodic email newsletter. So we hope that you found this information we shared this evening to be helpful. We're happy to answer any questions that you've submitted into the Q&A box. So we will allow you also, for those of you who haven't been submitting throughout, to submit your questions now. And as far as next steps go, in the coming months, AMP will be proposing the time of use rate for approval by the Public Utilities Board, and if approved, it would go into effect on July 1st, 2021. You will have an opt-in period prior to this start date, and we want to allow you plenty of time to decide if this rate is a good fit for you, using all the tools that we've reviewed tonight. You will also have an opportunity to opt out of the rate plan if you find that it's not right for you. If you have any follow-up questions after this evening or specific billing questions after the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have an EV-specific email address that's listed here, or you can always call the customer service department. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alan Harbottle, who's going to kick off the Q&A portion. So please stay tuned, and thank you all. Alan, I'm just going to ask if you'll unmute. Oops.
All right, Stephen, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great. Thanks everyone for your questions. I'm still seeing some more coming in, so we'll get to hopefully get to as many as we can. But if not, again, we've got our email address on the page here to reach out for further questions. So just start off with, is this a presentation available for download?
So this presentation is being recorded, which it probably notified you in the beginning, and we're going to be posting this recording on AMP's website.
All right, great. And I think just a few clarifications about the rate. Is 5 to 9 p.m. going to be on peak all year round?
Yes, we don't have any seasonal differences. It's just those two periods, which again are 5 to 9 p.m. on the weekdays and all hours of the day on weekends and holidays.
All right, and then a question here, when does the weekend start?
So when the off-peak period, or when the on-peak period, excuse me, ends on Friday evening, after 9 p.m. on Friday, the off-peak period would be effective until 5 p.m. the following Monday.
All right, great. I have, can AMP tell when and where customers are charging their EVs today? And if so, can the TOU rate be limited to EV usage only?
So currently we don't have that technology. All the smart meters that were installed are a whole home meter. So again, what we showed in the presentation, those are just our best estimates based on a customer that we know has an electric vehicle. But again, we don't know for certain that charging, or excuse me, that usage that was shown as starting high in the late evening hours was actually coming from an electric vehicle. And since we haven't installed a second meter that just captures the charging from your electric vehicle, the rate would apply to your whole home usage, including your electric vehicle.
Thanks, Stephen. Got a few questions about opting in and opting out. Can you just, can you do it seasonally? Can you return if you are not seeing the benefits you had expected? Just add a little.
So some of the details and the conditions are going to be covered in that upcoming PUB meeting, but typically most utilities only offer a chance every 12 months to change over a rate plan, and that's likely what AMP will be using. But the opt-out condition will also be, the details of that will be firmed out when we go back to the board. But there will be an opt-out option of some sort.
All right, and then the details on the time of use rate calculator, where can that be found?
Is that the one that I went over in the slides, the time of use calculator?
Yes.
Yeah, so I can go back to that slide quickly then. So if you just go directly to alamedamp.com, this is the banner you'll see at the top of the page. So you just follow all the way over to the right, where there's the electric vehicles menu, and then you're actually going to get all of these tabs below that, which you can click through. There's a lot of helpful information in there. And to get to the calculator specifically, it's this rate comparison tab.
All right, great. Can you one more time go over the on-peak versus off-peak times?
Sure, yeah, and it's more helpful if I go back to that slide. So one of the things we were hoping to achieve was to keep this rate a bit more simple and easy to understand for customers. So that is why we've chosen just 2 periods, and they are the same periods throughout the entire year. The on-peak period is 5 to 9 p.m. So if you start your EV charging at 9:01, you're going to be charged the off-peak period. So between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. is the on-peak period, and then before 5 p.m. or after 9 p.m. on the weekdays, and then it's all hours of the day on weekends and holidays. And again, these are the rates that will be associated with each of those periods.
All right, I think we're getting a little bit more into, this is a more advanced question, but maybe just talk about the creation of the rate a bit. So I have a question here. Understand that there's a higher rate charged during the on-peak period. The off-peak rate is above our current tier 1. Why is it more than the baseline today? Well, why is it more than the tier 1, which is our baseline usage for off-peak? If that's where we're trying to move customers, maybe that's just walk folks through the making the rate a bit.
Sure. So if customers wish to, they can also reference back to, I believe it was the February of 2019 PUB meeting. Sorry, excuse me, that's, I believe, the July of 2019 PUB meeting, and that was for information only. The rate consultant that was hired to work on this creation came up with 3 different proposals, and this is the rate proposal that the PUB had adopted at that point to move forward to develop this rate. And so this, one of the goals of the rate is to provide revenue neutrality when it comes to comparing it to the tiered rates. So when you aggregate all of the hours together that these rates are being applied to, and you compare that to the tiered rate, that's why the off-peak rate comes in a little bit higher than the tier 1 rate. But if you're comparing that to sort of the average rate that a customer typically pays on their current tiered rates, because those 3 tiers get blended together, their average rate that they're paying per kilowatt hour is going to most likely be higher. Well, it's certainly going to be higher than the tiered 1 rate if they're up into the higher tiers. And so that's basically where the goals set out by the PUB arrived at these particular rates. If that answered the question, but we have other members of the AMP staff if anyone wants to chime in and add to that.
Yeah, I think, just remembering that, this new TOU rate is a revenue neutral rate compared to the tiered rate. We are able to pass along the savings of shifting towards off-peak usage, but we're still facing keeping this revenue neutral compared to the original one, so that does gear you, more towards the average rate versus the baseline of the tier. For 2021, are we able to opt in for 2022?
So I believe these again are details that will be cemented when we take it back to the PUB, but my understanding is that there will be a rolling sign-up period. So while we'll have an open enrollment period prior to July 1st, 2021 to start on the time of use rate, customers will be able to opt into the rate at any point after that. Now, it's just a matter of the period that they're given to opt out of the rate, which will be finalized and presented at the next or the PUB meeting when we take this back. And then thereafter, it will be 12 months from there when you can make the rate changes and opt in and opt out of the plan. It would be based on that. It's not necessarily based on when the new rates are adopted and implemented.
And then
to make that more clear, you don't have to wait until 2022 to opt in to the rate if you don't sign up for it before it starts in 2021, if it's approved.
Yeah, just to, I think, clarify and respond. So yes, it's going to be available to opt in moving forward at any time. I think Stephen's trying to cover, there will be, some restrictions on how many times you're able to switch on and off, but no, this will be a rate moving forward that, have you not, maybe bounce back and forth a few times, you will be able to sign up at any time in the future. A couple questions on the discount. When will the EV discount be going away, and will it go away regardless of whether you opt in or not? So
this goes back to the PUB meeting last December, and so the PUB board has approved a conditional end date to the discount when the time of use rate gets implemented. This is again, so to answer your question, it's going to occur regardless of whether or not you opt into the time of use rate. And to go back to some of the earlier points we made in the presentation, we are shifting the incentive to those of you that are able to make some behavior changes and shift your charging to the off-peak hours. And so it would then remove the incentive, which is just a flat fixed discount each month.
This may be a question for Rebecca. Can we make the election for TOU online once it's effective, or will we need to speak with an AMP customer service representative?
Oh, sorry, had to unmute. We'll have to look at that. It's probably something we can do online. So I would think we could. We haven't really explored that yet, but it seems feasible.
A couple other, I think, less about the EV rate, but why is Tier 2 so small? I realize that looks a little silly. I'll actually jump in here. I mean, we evaluate and update our rates every year. This is largely a legacy item where after the California energy crisis across the state, Tier 1 and 2, and we're frozen to have a protected amount of usage for customers, and that Tier 2 was traditionally 100 to 130% of baseline usage, so roughly 30% of Tier 1. There's a little more flexibility to change that these days, but we've stayed in line with historical those changes. Another one, let's see, coming in. What percent of AMP's electricity is made via solar? A little off topic, but I think we can educate here.
Alan, do you know that number?
Well, so yeah, it's a good question. We have approximately 4.5 megawatts of behind the meter solar or customer solar, really. While we are, as of this year, 100% clean, and many of that coming from renewable sources, we have many contracts going back a ways with geothermal and landfill and wind, and so we do not have any utility solar at this point, although AMP is working towards getting local approval for solar at Doolittle, but that is still in process. I think this may be the last question here. Just one more time, talk about the timeline moving forward.
Sure, yeah. So in the next couple months, our team will be returning in front of the PUB, which will be a public meeting that you are all welcome to attend, and we'll be again proposing this rate. And based on whether that rate gets approved at that meeting, the proposed implementation date for the time of use rate is July 1st, 2021, and that's the time when all of our rates get updated on an annual basis. And prior to that, there will be an enrollment period before the July 1st date to give you ample time to assess your usage and decide if you would like to opt in to the rate, pending approval and when it would start on July 1st, 2021.
Yeah, with that, I think that's all we have. I think maybe just one more plug for the AMP website. There's a lot of great information for EV owners. A lot of information on rebates presented earlier is there. Also, should you have further questions, we have a dedicated email for EV questions, ev@alamedanp.com. And with that, I think, I think folks can look to the website to find a copy of this presentation, and everyone have a great night.